"Don't just stand there, rancher. Something bit me. Get the poison out before it spreads." The land stretched endlessly, dotted with rugged rocks, scattered bushes, and herds of cattle grazing under the hot sun. He loved every inch of it, the smell of dry soil after a morning breeze, the sound of cattle lowing in the distance, and even the endless chores that came with running a ranch. To many, life here would seem harsh, lonely, and tiring, but to Jack it was home. Every sunrise brought a new challenge, a new task, and a new chance to prove himself capable of living with nature on its own terms. He had grown up on this land, learning the rhythms of the earth from his father, who had taught him everything from fixing fences to riding horses through rocky paths. Jack often remembered sitting on the wooden porch as a boy, watching his father walk calmly among the cattle, speaking to each animal as if it could understand him. There was a quiet wisdom in his father's ways, a patience that Jack had carried into his own life. Though his father had passed away 10 years ago, Jack still felt his presence every time he worked the ranch. On this particular morning, the sun had already climbed high into the sky, sending waves of heat across the dusty ground. Jack was out early, checking the cattle along the eastern boundary of the ranch. The land here was rougher, filled with jagged rocks and narrow paths that wound through low hills. It wasn't the easiest area to navigate, but the cattle often wandered here, so it was important to make sure none of them had strayed too far. Walking beside him was Miguel, his longtime ranch hand. Miguel had been with Jack for over 15 years, and they had become more like brothers than employer and employee. Miguel was quiet most of the time, preferring to let the work speak for him. But when he did speak, his words carried weight. He knew the land as well as Jack did, often pointing out small details that might escape the owner's notice: a broken fence post, a patch of dry grass, or a sign that a snake might be nearby. They moved slowly through the rocky terrain, their boots crunching over the loose stones. Jack had his hat pulled low against the glaring sun, sweat running down the back of his neck. He carried a long stick, both to help him navigate the uneven ground and as a precaution against snakes, which were common in this area. Miguel carried a small satchel with basic tools, a first aid kit, and a water bottle. The two men had done this routine hundreds of times, yet Jack never felt bored or weary. Each trip reminded him how much he loved the simple, raw life of a rancher. As they approached a narrow path between two rocky outcrops, Miguel stopped suddenly, squinting at the ground. "Jack," he said in a low voice, "look at this." Jack stepped closer. There, coiled among the rocks, was a rattlesnake. Its patterned skin blended almost perfectly with the dry stones, and its tail shook slightly in warning. Jack froze. He had seen many snakes before, but there was always a moment of tension when one appeared so close. These creatures were beautiful, deadly, and commanding of respect. Miguel raised a hand to signal him to stay back. "Don't move too close. We don't want to provoke it," he whispered. The snake's head lifted slightly, tongue flicking in and out, sensing the vibrations of the ground. Jack admired its sleek body and the way it seemed perfectly designed for its environment. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, the snake disappeared into a crevice. Both men exhaled, the tension slowly leaving their bodies. "Good thing you noticed it," Jack said, clapping Miguel on the shoulder. "Could have been ugly if we weren't careful." Miguel nodded, his expression serious. "It's always here, especially near these rocks. You've got to watch every step." They continued along the path, the heat of the morning pressing down on them. The wind was dry and warm, carrying the faint scent of the cattle and the earth. Jack noticed a small bird darting between the bushes, singing as if the world was untouched by danger. For a moment, he allowed himself to relax, feeling the peace that came from being in a place where life moved at its own pace. As they walked, Jack's mind wandered to his family. He thought of his father's stories about surviving harsh winters, of the lessons he had learned about patience, courage, and respect for the land. Every day on the ranch was a lesson in itself, a reminder that life was fragile but also resilient. The cattle needed care, the fences needed mending, and the land demanded attention. Yet, in the midst of these responsibilities, Jack found joy. There was a rhythm to ranch life, a balance between hard work and moments of quiet beauty. Suddenly, Miguel stopped again, this time with a sharp intake of breath. "Jack, something bit me." His voice was urgent, breaking the calm that had settled over them. Jack turned quickly to see Miguel clutching his hand, his face twisted in pain. His voice trembled as he repeated, "Get the poison out before it spreads." Jack's heart pounded. He had seen bites before, and he knew the danger all too well. The desert was full of venomous creatures, and even a small mistake could turn deadly in minutes. Without hesitation, Jack dropped to his knees beside Miguel, examining the wound. It was small, but the swelling was quick to appear, and Miguel's skin was pale, his breathing shallow. Jack's mind raced. There was no hospital nearby, no one to call for help immediately. The nearest medical facility was hours away by truck over rough terrain. Every second counted. He remembered an old technique his father had taught him long ago, how to slow the spread of venom until help could arrive. Jack took a deep breath, trying to stay calm, though his own hands shook slightly. He had faced challenges before, but nothing quite like this. "Stay with me, Miguel," Jack said firmly, his voice steady despite the fear gripping him. "We're going to take care of this. Just hold still." Miguel nodded, his eyes wide with pain and fear. Jack quickly grabbed the first aid kit from Miguel's satchel. He worked carefully, recalling the steps his father had taught him. He cleaned the bite area, made a small incision to draw out the venom, and used a suction device to help remove it. Miguel winced but remained as calm as he could, trusting Jack completely. As Jack worked, he couldn't help but think about how quickly life could change. One moment they were walking along, enjoying the morning sun, and the next, a single bite had thrown their world into uncertainty. The desert, which had seemed peaceful and predictable, suddenly felt wild and dangerous. Jack's mind was sharp, focused entirely on the task at hand, but beneath it all was a quiet admiration for Miguel's courage. After several tense minutes, Jack had done what he could. Miguel's breathing eased slightly, and the swelling began to slow. But they both knew this was only the beginning. They had to get help, and fast. Jack helped Miguel to his feet, supporting him as they began the long journey back to the ranch. Every step was careful, every movement deliberate, as Jack guided his friend over rocks, through dry brush, and along narrow paths. Through it all, Jack's mind replayed memories of his father's teachings, of the lessons about patience, courage, and respect for life. He realized that ranch life was not just about tending cattle or fixing fences. It was about being ready for the unexpected, about facing danger with calm determination, and about caring for others when they needed you most. By the time they reached a more open area of the ranch, Jack could see the faint outline of the main road in the distance. Relief mixed with exhaustion, but he did not let his guard down. The day was far from over, and there was still a long journey ahead to get Miguel the help he needed. Yet, despite the danger and the fear, Jack felt a quiet sense of pride. He had faced this challenge head-on, just as his father had taught him, and he had not faltered. The morning sun climbed higher in the sky, casting long shadows across the land. Jack looked at Miguel, who was leaning heavily on his shoulder, and he felt a deep sense of connection and gratitude. Life on the ranch was harsh and unpredictable, but it was also full of moments that tested courage, built trust, and reminded him of the strength that could be found in the human spirit. And as they moved slowly toward safety, Jack knew that this day, like so many others before it, would become part of the story of the land, part of the legacy he would one day pass on to those who came after him. The rocky path back to the main ranch road stretched before them, winding through the hills and patches of dry brush. Jack kept a steady pace, supporting Miguel as they moved, but every step was measured carefully. The land that had seemed so peaceful earlier now felt more threatening. Each shadow, each rustle of leaves made Jack's pulse quicken. He knew the desert was full of surprises, and one misstep could make a bad situation worse. Miguel's breathing was shallow, and his hand throbbed with pain. Jack could see the worry etched on his face, though he tried to hide it. The heat pressed down on them, heavy and unrelenting, and the sun made the rocks shimmer as if they were alive. Jack took a moment to offer some encouragement. "You're doing great, Miguel. Just a little further and we'll reach the truck. We've got this." Miguel managed a weak nod, but it was clear that he was struggling. His steps were unsteady, and Jack had to hold him firmly to prevent a fall. The thought of the distance they still had to cover made Jack's chest tighten. He knew the nearest hospital was hours away, and even with the truck the journey would be rough. But he had no choice. There was no time to wait for someone else to come to them. It was up to him. The path became narrower, and jagged rocks forced them to move slowly. Jack scanned the ground carefully, looking for signs of rattlesnakes or any other danger. He remembered the small snake they had seen earlier, and the memory made him even more cautious. One wrong step could send them tumbling down a slope, and the last thing he needed was another injury. They passed a dry creek bed, its sandy bottom cracked from the sun. A few birds circled overhead, calling out in the silence of the desert. Jack tried to focus on the beauty of the scene to keep his mind calm, but his attention kept drifting back to Miguel's condition. He could see the sweat dripping down Miguel's face, hear the faint quiver in his voice as he tried to speak. Time was moving too slowly, yet every second mattered. Jack decided to stop briefly under the shade of a large rock outcrop. "Sit down for a moment, Miguel," he said gently. "We need to catch our breath." Miguel sank onto the rock, wincing as he adjusted his position. "Jack, I feel it spreading," he said quietly, fear flickering in his eyes. "My hand, it's burning, I'm scared." Jack put a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "I know, Miguel, I know, but you're strong and we've already slowed it down. You're going to be okay. Just hang on a little longer." Miguel closed his eyes and took slow, shaky breaths. Jack pulled out the water bottle from Miguel's satchel and offered him a few sips. The water was warm from the sun, but it helped. Jack drank some himself, trying to stay hydrated and alert. The desert could be unforgiving, and exhaustion could make even the strongest person falter. After a few minutes, Jack helped Miguel back onto his feet. "We have to keep moving," he said. "We're closer now. I can see the main road from here." Miguel nodded, leaning heavily on Jack as they continued. The path descended into a shallow valley, the rocks giving way to patches of sand and low shrubs. Jack could see the fence line of the ranch in the distance, and beyond it, the main dirt road that led to the truck. Relief flickered through him, but he kept his focus sharp. They weren't safe yet. As they moved, Jack's thoughts wandered to the dangers of ranch life. He had faced storms, wild animals, and accidents before, but there was something uniquely terrifying about a venomous bite. It was invisible, silent, and could strike without warning. One moment, everything seemed normal, and the next, a single bite could change a life forever. He thought of his father again, of the lessons about being prepared, staying calm, and acting decisively. Those lessons were now more important than ever. Halfway through the valley, Miguel stumbled. Jack caught him just in time, holding him steady. "Careful," he said firmly. "You can't afford to fall." "I'm fine," Miguel replied, though his voice was weak. "Just my leg feels wobbly." Jack knew it was not just fatigue. The venom was spreading, affecting Miguel's strength. He tightened his grip and encouraged him forward. "We're almost there, just a little more." The valley was quiet except for their footsteps and the distant sounds of the cattle. Jack noticed a hawk circling above, its sharp eyes scanning the ground. Nature was alive around them, beautiful and indifferent. Jack felt a strange mix of admiration and urgency. The desert had its own rules, and he had to respect them while keeping Miguel safe. As they climbed a small rise, the heat became more intense. Jack's shirt clung to his back with sweat, and his face was red from exertion. He could see Miguel struggling with each step, his hands swelling further. Jack realized that if they didn't reach the truck soon, Miguel's condition could worsen quickly. Jack's mind raced for solutions. He thought about tying Miguel to a makeshift stretcher, but the rocky path made it impossible. Carrying him completely was also too difficult. They had to keep moving on foot, slowly and carefully. Jack adjusted his grip on Miguel and encouraged him to focus on each step. "Just one step at a time," he said. "We'll get there, I'm right here." The climb felt endless, and Jack could see the worry in Miguel's eyes. He tried to distract him with conversation, speaking about the cattle, the work that awaited them, and the familiar sights of the ranch. "Remember the old barn near the north pasture? We'll check on it after this. Those cows are probably wandering again," he said with a small smile. Miguel chuckled weakly, and Jack felt a brief sense of relief. Humor was a small victory in the face of danger, a sign that Miguel's spirit was still strong. They continued, each step a careful negotiation with the uneven ground. Jack's muscles ached, his arms trembling from supporting Miguel, but he refused to slow down. Time was critical. As they neared the main road, the landscape opened up. The hills gave way to flatter land, and Jack could see the truck parked near the barn. Relief washed over him, but he didn't let it show. He focused on keeping Miguel steady, knowing that exhaustion and pain could cause another fall. "Almost there," Jack said. "Just a few more steps." Miguel leaned heavily on him, breathing raggedly. I can't feel my hand properly," he whispered. Jack's heart tightened, but he kept his voice calm. "You're okay, just a little further. I've got you." Finally, they reached the truck. Jack helped Miguel climb into the passenger seat and quickly jumped in behind the wheel. The engine roared to life, and Jack drove carefully along the dirt road, keeping the truck steady over every bump and groove. Miguel's breathing was still shallow, and Jack could see the swelling in his hand increasing. Jack's mind raced with every possible way to get help faster. The nearest hospital was still miles away, but he knew the doctors would need Miguel as soon as possible. He drove with steady hands, glancing occasionally at Miguel, offering words of encouragement. "You're strong. You're going to make it, just hang on." The sun was high in the sky now, beating down on the truck and the land. Jack felt the heat, the exhaustion, and the weight of responsibility, but he pushed through it. Every mile brought them closer to safety, and every second was a chance to save his friend. The truck bounced over a particularly rough patch, and Miguel flinched. "It hurts," he said quietly. "I know," Jack replied softly. "I know it does, but we're almost there. Just a little further." The landscape blurred outside the window as Jack focused on the road. He thought about how quickly life could change, how fragile the human body was, and how essential it was to remain calm in the face of danger. This moment, like so many others on the ranch, was a test of courage, determination, and friendship. Finally, in the distance, Jack saw the outline of the small hospital, a modest building standing against the backdrop of the desert hills. Relief and hope surged through him. They were almost there. He pulled the truck to the entrance, helping Miguel out carefully. Nurses and doctors rushed to meet them, taking Miguel inside immediately. Jack stayed for a moment, watching as Miguel was treated. The fear and tension of the morning began to lift, replaced by a quiet exhaustion. He knew the road ahead would include recovery, rest, and reflection, but for now, Miguel was in safe hands. Jack stepped outside, looking back at the desert land. It was the same land he had walked that morning, full of beauty and danger, challenges and lessons. And as the sun began to dip toward the horizon, Jack felt a deep sense of gratitude for survival, for friendship, and for the quiet strength that life on the ranch had taught him. Inside the small hospital, the air smelled faintly of antiseptic and warm medicine. The quiet hum of machines mixed with the occasional footsteps of nurses and the soft murmur of patients in distant rooms. Jack followed closely behind as a nurse guided Miguel onto a stretcher. Miguel's face was pale and his hand was still swollen, though the temporary first aid Jack had given him had slowed the worst of the venom. Jack felt a mixture of relief and lingering worry. The danger wasn't over yet, but at least Miguel was now in professional hands. A young doctor approached, introducing himself with a calm, steady voice. "What happened?" he asked, glancing at Miguel's hand. Jack quickly explained everything: the bite, the swelling, the makeshift first aid, and the long journey across the rough terrain. The doctor listened attentively, nodding occasionally, then turned to Miguel with reassurance. "We're going to take care of you. You're safe now." As the medical staff moved to treat Miguel, Jack found a chair in the corner of the room and sat down. His mind refused to slow down. He thought about the morning, the peaceful start, the sudden bite, and the desperate walk back across the desert. Each detail replayed vividly in his memory. The adrenaline had worn off, leaving a mix of exhaustion and relief, but also a strange emptiness. The land he loved so much, the desert that had always felt alive and welcoming, now seemed dangerous and unpredictable. Jack's gaze wandered to the window, where the late morning sun streamed in. Outside, the desert stretched endlessly, golden and silent, as if nothing had happened. He thought about his father again and the lessons about respect for the land. Nature was beautiful, but it had its own rules, and it demanded attention, caution, and understanding. The bite had reminded him of just how fragile life could be, even for someone like Miguel, who was strong, experienced, and careful. Meanwhile, Miguel was being treated in the small emergency room. The doctor administered anti-venom and carefully monitored his vital signs. The swelling in his hand was slowly beginning to subside, and the pain, though still present, was easing. The doctor explained that the venom had been partially neutralized by Jack's quick first aid, and that Miguel was lucky to have received help when he did. Back in the waiting area, Jack's thoughts continued to drift. He remembered the way Miguel had called out to him, the fear in his voice, and the panic that had momentarily taken hold. Jack knew he had to remain calm, but the memory of that urgency still lingered. He reflected on the strength it took to act decisively in moments of crisis, and the trust required to stay focused while someone you care about is in danger. After what felt like an eternity but was actually only a few hours, the doctor came out to speak with Jack. "He's stable now," the doctor said with a reassuring nod. "The venom is being neutralized and his vital signs are steady. We'll keep him here for observation overnight, just to make sure there are no complications." Jack exhaled, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. Relief washed over him, but it was tempered by the memories of the morning's events. He realized that even the strongest, most experienced people could be caught off guard by life's sudden dangers. The desert had tested them, and they had survived, but only just. Once Miguel was settled in his hospital bed, Jack stayed nearby, speaking quietly to him. "You're going to be okay," he said gently. "The worst is behind us now. Just rest and let them take care of you." Miguel tried to smile, though the effort was small and strained. "Thanks, Jack. I don't know what I would have done without you," he whispered. His voice was tired, but there was genuine gratitude in it. Jack felt a warmth in his chest at Miguel's words. Moments like this reminded him why he had spent so many years building trust, working alongside people he cared about, and respecting the land that provided their livelihood. As the day passed, Jack found a quiet corner in the hospital to gather his thoughts. He reflected on the events of the past hours, the calm morning, the sudden danger, the desperate walk back, and the tense drive to get help. Each memory carried its own weight, teaching him lessons about courage, preparedness, and resilience. He also thought about the bonds that had been strengthened through the crisis. The trust between him and Miguel had deepened, formed not just through years of work, but through moments of life and death. Jack realized that the ranch, with all its challenges, was more than just a place of work. It was a place where people learned to rely on each other, where courage was tested, and where respect for life, both human and animal, was taught every day. Later, a nurse brought Miguel a cup of water and checked his IV. Jack stayed nearby, watching his friend sip the water slowly. "Feeling a little better?" he asked. Miguel nodded, though his hand still throbbed. "A bit still sore," he admitted, "but I think I'm going to make it." Jack smiled, feeling a mixture of relief and pride. "You will," he said firmly, "and next time we'll make sure to avoid the snakes a little more carefully." As the afternoon sun began to dip toward the horizon, the hospital quieted down. The hum of machines continued, but the earlier sense of urgency had faded. Jack took the opportunity to step outside for a moment, breathing in the warm desert air. The sky was painted with shades of orange and gold, and the land stretched endlessly in every direction. Despite the morning's danger, Jack felt a sense of awe. The desert was alive, challenging, and unforgiving, but it was also beautiful, resilient, and full of lessons for those willing to pay attention. Jack thought about the future. He knew that Miguel would recover fully, but he also understood that life on the ranch would continue to carry risks. Each day brought new challenges, and he would need to remain vigilant. But he also felt a renewed sense of purpose. The bite had reminded him of the importance of courage, quick thinking, and trust. These were qualities that defined life on the ranch, and they were qualities he intended to pass on to others in his care. That evening, Jack returned to Miguel's bedside as the sun set. The warm, golden light filtered through the window, casting soft shadows across the room. Miguel was resting, his breathing steady, and the swelling in his hand had begun to decrease. Jack sat quietly, feeling a deep sense of connection to his friend, the land, and the life they shared. "You know," Miguel said softly after a few moments, "I never realized how fast things could change. One minute everything is normal, and the next, I'm fighting for my life." Jack nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. "Life is fragile," he said, "but it's also strong. We survive because we work together, because we pay attention, and because we don't give up." Miguel managed a small smile, and Jack felt a wave of relief wash over him. The crisis had passed, and while the memory would linger, it had also strengthened their bond. They had faced danger, and they had endured. As night fell over the desert, Jack stayed by Miguel's side for a while longer, reflecting on the events of the day. The desert was quiet now, but he knew it would continue to teach lessons in the days ahead. He thought about the cattle, the fences, and the endless land that awaited him back at the ranch. There would be more challenges, more dangers, and more moments that would test his courage and resolve. But Jack felt ready. He had faced one of the most terrifying moments of his life, and had come through it with skill, patience, and determination. Finally, Jack stepped out of the room, leaving Miguel to rest. He walked slowly down the hospital corridor, feeling the weight of the day in his body but also a sense of accomplishment. They had survived the bite, and they had survived together. The morning's events had reminded him of the strength of human spirit, the importance of trust and courage, and the unpredictable beauty of the land he loved. Jack looked out the window at the desert once more. The sky was darkening, the first stars beginning to appear, and the land stretched endlessly, calm and silent. Despite the danger and fear of the day, Jack felt a deep sense of respect and gratitude. The desert was a teacher, the ranch was a classroom, and life itself was the ultimate lesson. He knew that tomorrow would bring new tasks, new challenges, and new opportunities to prove courage and resilience. But for now, he allowed himself to breathe, to rest, and to reflect on what they had survived. The bond between him and Miguel was stronger than ever, and the lessons of the day would stay with him forever. Jack walked outside into the cool night air, taking a deep breath. The desert was quiet, the stars bright, and the world felt alive yet peaceful. He smiled to himself, knowing that they had faced danger and emerged stronger. And as he gazed at the endless land before him, he felt ready to continue, ready to face whatever came next, and grateful for the life he had, the friend at his side, and the lessons that would guide him in the days ahead. The morning after the bite arrived with a gentle light, spilling through the hospital window. The desert outside was calm, the warm hues of sunrise stretching across the hills, and a soft breeze whispered through the trees near the hospital. Inside, Miguel was awake, his hand still tender and wrapped in a clean bandage. Jack sat beside him, his own body tired from the long ordeal but his mind alert, ready to help in any way he could. Miguel's eyes opened slowly and he gave Jack a weak smile. "Morning," he said softly. "I feel a little better." Jack returned the smile, though concern lingered in his eyes. "Good. You're healing. The swelling's going down and your vitals are strong. The doctor says you're doing well." Miguel looked down at his hand, still swollen but no longer throbbing with pain. "I can't believe how fast things went wrong," he said quietly. "One moment I'm checking the cattle and the next I'm fighting for my life." Jack nodded, understanding the weight of those words. "Life on the ranch is like that sometimes," he said. "It's unpredictable. You've got to respect the land, watch your steps, and always be ready. But we got through it together." Miguel's face softened with gratitude. "I don't know what I'd have done without you, Jack. You saved me." Jack felt a warmth in his chest at the words. He had always known that ranch life required courage and vigilance, but this experience had shown him just how quickly circumstances could change, and how essential trust and teamwork were. He clasped Miguel's shoulder gently. "We take care of each other out here. That's how we survive." The nurse came in shortly after to check Miguel's hand and adjust the IV. She praised Miguel for staying calm during the night, noting that his progress was excellent and that he could likely be discharged the following day. Jack listened carefully to the instructions, asking questions about what Miguel would need to do at home. The desert could still pose dangers, and Jack wanted to make sure Miguel had all the information to stay safe. Once the nurse left, the two men sat quietly for a while, listening to the faint hum of hospital machines and the distant voices of staff. Jack's mind wandered back to the events of the previous day, the panic, the fear, the long trek back to the truck, and the tense drive to the hospital. Every moment had tested him, but he had discovered strength he hadn't fully realized before. He had acted quickly, thought clearly, and guided his friend to safety. Miguel broke the silence. "Jack, do you ever think about how fragile life is out here?" he asked. Jack nodded slowly. "Every day, but that's what makes it beautiful too. Every sunrise, every herd we tend, every fence we repair. It all matters because it could all change in an instant. That's why we respect it and why we stay alert." Miguel's eyes met Jack's, filled with a mix of awe and appreciation. "I'll never take a moment out here for granted again. I've always loved the ranch, but now I feel it in a different way." Jack smiled, understanding exactly what he meant. Danger had sharpened Miguel's awareness, just as it had sharpened his own. Life on the ranch was not just work. It was a lesson in courage, patience, and humility. Later that morning, the doctor came by for a follow-up. "You're lucky," he said, examining Miguel's hand. The quick first aid slowed the venom enough to prevent serious complications. "With proper rest and care, you should make a full recovery." Miguel's shoulders relaxed, and he let out a quiet sigh of relief. "Thank goodness," he murmured. "I never realized how serious it could have been." Jack looked at his friend, feeling both pride and humility. "You're strong," he said. "We just had to make sure you got the help you needed. That's all." As the day progressed, Miguel rested while Jack made plans for the trip back to the ranch. He thought carefully about the supplies they might need, the routes they would take, and the precautions required to prevent another accident. The bite had been a harsh reminder that even familiar surroundings could hide unexpected dangers. Before leaving the hospital, Jack spoke with the nurse again. "We'll be heading back this afternoon," he said. "Do you have any last instructions for us?" The nurse smiled warmly. "Keep him hydrated, watch for swelling, and avoid strenuous activity for a few days. Otherwise, he should be fine. And thank you for acting so quickly. Your first aid made a big difference." Jack nodded, feeling a deep sense of responsibility and satisfaction. The experience had been frightening, but it had also reinforced his confidence and his commitment to caring for those around him. Life on the ranch demanded readiness, and he had seen firsthand what preparedness could accomplish. By early afternoon, the two men were ready to leave. Jack helped Miguel into the truck, ensuring he was comfortable and secure. The ride back across the desert was slower than usual, with Jack keeping a careful eye on every bump and turn in the road. The sun was high and bright, but the intensity of the morning's events made the familiar landscape feel strangely new, almost alive with potential danger and opportunity. As they drove, Miguel leaned back and closed his eyes, taking slow, deep breaths. Jack kept the truck steady, speaking occasionally to offer reassurance. "We're almost home," he said. "You'll be back on the ranch safe and sound soon." Miguel nodded faintly, his trust in Jack evident. "I know, I don't want to ever feel that scared again." Jack understood completely. Fear was a natural reaction and it had been necessary for survival. But he also knew that courage was not the absence of fear, it was acting despite it. "You were brave," he said softly, "and now you've got the rest of us to look out for you. That's what matters." The truck bounced over a rocky path and Jack glanced at the horizon. The familiar shapes of the ranch buildings came into view, the barn, the corrals, and the sprawling fields beyond. Relief and anticipation warmed him. Home meant safety, routine, and a chance to recover fully. But it also meant facing the responsibilities of ranch life, knowing that challenges would always arise. When they arrived at the ranch, Jack helped Miguel out of the truck and into the shade of a large tree. The heat of the desert afternoon pressed down on them, but the familiar smells and sights of the ranch brought comfort. Cattle grazed peacefully, and the soft rustle of leaves in the wind reminded them that life continued, steady and unbroken, despite the morning's events. Miguel stretched his hand carefully, wincing slightly but managing a small smile. "It feels good to be back," he said quietly. Jack clapped him on the shoulder. "We've got a few things to check, fences to repair and cattle to tend, but we'll take it slow. No more risks today." The day passed with a mix of quiet activity and rest. Jack made sure Miguel stayed hydrated and comfortable, while also checking the ranch for any hazards that might cause trouble. They spoke often about what had happened, reflecting on the morning's events and the lessons they had learned. Each conversation reinforced the importance of vigilance, teamwork, and preparation. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, Jack sat with Miguel on the porch of the ranch house. The desert stretched endlessly before them, calm and serene, a stark contrast to the chaos of the morning. They watched quietly, feeling a deep connection to the land, the animals, and each other. Miguel broke the silence. "I've learned something important today," he said softly. "Life is precious, and you never know when it can change in an instant. But having someone you trust by your side makes all the difference." Jack nodded, understanding completely. "Exactly. That's what the ranch teaches us, patience, courage, and reliance on one another. We're stronger together, and that's what keeps us going." The evening settled over the ranch, the air cooling gently. Jack reflected on the events of the past days, the bite, the journey to the hospital, the treatment, and the return home. He realized that while danger was always present, the experience had strengthened their bonds, deepened their understanding of the land, and reminded them of the courage and resilience within themselves. As night fell, the stars appeared one by one, shining brightly in the clear desert sky. Jack looked at Miguel, who was now resting comfortably, and felt a profound sense of gratitude. They had survived the bite, faced fear, and emerged stronger. The ranch, with all its challenges and beauty, had taught them valuable lessons that would stay with them forever. And as the cool desert night wrapped around the land, Jack knew that life would continue to test them in unexpected ways. But together, they would face whatever came next, ready, vigilant, and strong. The days following Miguel's recovery passed slowly but steadily. Life on the ranch had returned to its familiar rhythm, cattle grazing under the sun, fences that needed mending, and the constant hum of desert winds through the dry grass. Yet, for both Jack and Miguel, nothing felt quite ordinary anymore. The snake bite and the events that followed had left a lasting impression, shaping the way they saw their land, their work, and each other. Miguel moved with more caution than usual, checking the ground carefully before taking a step, inspecting rocks and brush that might hide danger. His hand, though healing well, reminded him of the fragility of life, and he treated every task with quiet respect. Jack watched him, admiration shining in his eyes. The experience had strengthened Miguel's understanding of the desert and the ranch, and it had deepened the bond between them. They no longer took their daily routines for granted. Every sunrise was a gift, every herd safely tended a victory. Jack spent the mornings with Miguel, guiding him through light tasks that would not strain his hand. They repaired fences, checked on the cattle, and prepared supplies for the rest of the ranch. The work was steady, and the sun was warm on their backs, but both men were mindful of the lessons learned during the bite. The desert demanded vigilance, patience, and respect, and they carried those lessons into every action. One afternoon, as the sun poured golden light over the hills, Jack and Miguel paused by a small creek that ran through the ranch. The water was clear and cold, and the sound of it flowing over stones was calming. They knelt by the edge, dipping their hands into the cool water and washing away the sweat and dust of the day. For a moment, they sat in silence, listening to the gentle rush and watching birds dart among the trees. Miguel broke the quiet. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened," he said softly. "I never realized how quickly life could change. One moment everything is normal and the next it's not." Jack nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. "It's true," he said, "but that's why we have to be ready. We have to respect the land and each other, and we have to act when it matters most. That's what keeps us safe." Miguel smiled faintly. "I understand now, and I also understand how lucky I am, not just for the help but for having someone who cares enough to act." Jack placed a hand on Miguel's shoulder. "That's what friends do. That's what family does. Out here, we rely on each other because we know the land isn't the only challenge. Life itself can test us in ways we never expect." The two men spent the rest of the day inspecting the far side of the ranch. Jack pointed out patches of dry grass that could be dangerous to cattle, and Miguel offered his thoughts on how to improve the water supply for the herd. They spoke calmly, deliberately, enjoying the quiet companionship that had been strengthened through shared danger. It was not the excitement of the bite that filled the day, but the calm after it, the steady return to life, tempered with understanding and appreciation. As the week progressed, Miguel regained more strength, and Jack allowed him to resume heavier work. He lifted gates, moved supplies, and even handled small equipment, all under Jack's careful supervision. The two men laughed at minor mistakes and encouraged each other, their camaraderie deepened by the shared ordeal. Every task, no matter how ordinary, now carried new meaning. They were more aware of the stakes of life on the ranch, and more grateful for the safety, trust, and resilience they shared. One morning, Jack led Miguel to the northern pasture, where a small herd had wandered closer to the fence than usual. "See this?" Jack asked, pointing to the uneven fence posts. "We fixed this today so nothing gets out or anyone gets hurt." Miguel nodded, rolling up his sleeves. "I'm ready," he said confidently. Though the memory of the bite still lingered, it no longer controlled him. He was strong, careful, and focused, applying the lessons he had learned in the past week. They worked steadily, repairing the fence with careful precision. The sun rose higher, casting long shadows across the pasture. Sweat dripped down their backs, but there was satisfaction in the labor, in knowing that they were protecting the herd, the land, and themselves. By mid-morning, the repairs were complete, and the herd moved safely back into the enclosure, lowing softly as if in gratitude. Jack stepped back and looked at Miguel. "You did well," he said proudly. "You've come a long way in a short time." Miguel smiled, wiping his brow. "Thanks to you, Jack. I wouldn't have made it without your help." The experience of the bite had changed something in both men. They were more aware of danger, but they were also more appreciative of life's ordinary moments. The laughter, the shared work, the peaceful mornings. They had faced fear together and had emerged stronger, more connected, and more mindful of the fragility and beauty of life. As the days turned into weeks, Miguel continued to recover fully. He regained complete strength in his hand and even began to take on more challenging tasks around the ranch. Jack observed him with pride, knowing that the incident had strengthened Miguel's resilience and deepened his respect for the land and life itself. One evening, as the sun began to set in brilliant shades of orange and red, Jack and Miguel sat on the porch of the ranch house, overlooking the fields. The cattle grazed peacefully, and the air was filled with the soft sounds of the desert, the rustle of leaves, the call of distant birds, and the quiet hum of life continuing. Miguel broke the silence. "I've learned something important from all of this," he said. "Life is precious. Danger can appear when you least expect it, but having someone who cares, someone who acts without hesitation, that makes all the difference." Jack nodded slowly, his eyes reflecting the golden light of the sunset. "Exactly. That's what life teaches us, and that's what the ranch teaches us too. Courage, patience, trust, and respect for the land and for each other. We've seen it firsthand." Miguel smiled faintly. "I'll never forget it, and I'll never forget what you did for me." Jack placed a hand on his friend's shoulder, feeling the bond between them strengthened by the ordeal. "You don't have to," he said softly. "We take care of each other out here, and that's what counts." As the night settled over the ranch, the stars appeared one by one, bright and clear against the desert sky. The air cooled gently, carrying the faint scent of grass and earth. Jack and Miguel sat quietly, listening to the soft sounds of the night and reflecting on the journey they had taken together. The bite, the hospital, and the recovery had all been part of a lesson, one that taught courage, the importance of quick thinking, and the strength of trust. The ranch, as always, stood steady and enduring, a reminder of life's continuity despite challenges. The fields, the animals, and the land itself seemed to radiate resilience and calm. Jack felt a deep sense of gratitude for the lessons learned, for Miguel's survival, and for the enduring strength of the human spirit. The following days brought a return to normal routine. Miguel tended the fields, checked the water supplies, and helped with the cattle. Jack guided him, offering advice and sharing stories of past experiences on the ranch. Life was steady, predictable, and full of small, meaningful victories. Every day was a reminder of the balance between danger and care, risk and vigilance, challenge and reward. One afternoon, after completing a long day of work, Jack and Miguel sat on a hill overlooking the ranch. The sun was low, casting golden light across the fields and hills. They spoke quietly, reflecting on the past events and the lessons learned. Miguel said softly, "I feel different now, stronger, more aware, and more grateful. Life feels more important." Jack smiled, understanding completely. "That's the desert teaching you. Life is precious and every day counts. We respect it, care for it, and face it with courage. That's what makes us survive and thrive." As twilight fell, the ranch grew quiet. The animals settled, the wind rustled softly, and the sky deepened into shades of indigo and silver. Jack and Miguel sat together in companionable silence, feeling a deep connection to the land, to each other, and to the lessons of life. The ordeal of the snake bite was behind them, but its impact remained, a reminder of courage, trust, and the strength found in friendship. In the days and months that followed, the ranch continued its steady rhythm. Jack and Miguel worked side by side, tending the land, caring for the cattle, and sharing the quiet joys of life in the desert. They faced new challenges, but with the knowledge and experience gained from the bite, they were ready. The incident had taught them resilience, vigilance, and the priceless value of human connection. And as the stars shone over the desert night, Jack felt a profound sense of peace. They had faced danger, acted with courage, and emerged stronger. Life on the ranch was full of challenges, but also full of beauty, strength, and the enduring bond of friendship. Together they would continue, vigilant, prepared, and grateful for every sunrise and every shared moment.